We know that ahead of the Commonwealth Games, a lot of issues were being reported on in the press about poor infrastructure, about poor construction, about health and safety issues in India. A lot of it, many people say, is unfair press, but nonetheless a very realistic depiction of what's going on there. What do you make of the infrastructure gaps in India?
Well, I think one must go back to even before 1991. You know, India's economy only was liberated, so to speak, in 1991. And before that, it really had an autarkic kind of economy, which really was a centralized economy. It was based really on the production of the things that they needed in order to survive. And so the liberalization only really started from about 1994 onwards. So if one thinks of what type of backlog they have with a population of 1.2 billion people, then, and being the world's largest democracy, then one can understand that there are huge challenges that they face, competing challenges, especially in a democracy.
I mean, often we talk about India as one of the leading BRIC economies, a country that's growing above 8%, a country with a critical mass of 1 billion people, but we never talk about these infrastructure gaps. How is it that an economy that's surging ahead globally has these problems?
Well, I think that stems from that, and also one of the unfortunate legacies that they have is that their work ethic, according to some reports, is a bit suspect. There are indications and reports of unprofessional attitude towards work, some lackadaisical approaches to work, and there doesn't seem to be a culture of being proactive in terms of this kind of planning. At the same time, they are facing these huge challenges, which are competing for limited resources, right. And they're obviously trying to do the best that they can.
Okay, now with a population of 1 billion, it's the 5th largest consumer of electricity or energy the world over. They're expected to be the 3rd largest in just a few years' time. What is the state of India's energy security?
Well, India has got some enormous challenges. Obviously, things like energy and power underpin an economy, a growing, a burgeoning economy, in fact, like India's economy. And India, unfortunately, doesn't have sufficient resources to propel this engine of its economic growth. And it needs to look offshore, and it's specifically at 3 types of energy: liquid energy, coal, which it imports from African countries, and also of course crude oil, which it uses for and it only produces in fact it imports about 89% of its energy requirements.
Right. Okay, let's talk about India's investments in Africa, because we've seen them investing in the ICT space and the manufacturing space. They're not very aggressive within the mining space, but increasingly growing a profile within the coal mining sphere to feed into this energy security. What could India do differently to try to see Africa as a source for oil and gas, as you're talking about, and coal in terms of dealing with its energy problems?
I really think that India is a unique case in point. It has a different approach, and an aggressive approach is really not the style of India. It has a long history of being, having an anti-colonial stance, of showing solidarity from the 1955 Bandung Conference and throughout the Cold War. It displayed this kind of solidarity. So its approach will unlikely be of an aggressive sort of nature, but it will try to endear itself and offer better alternatives than other countries like China and so on.
Kobie, just your comments on this one. We know that the Indian government, well aware of the problems that it's facing regarding infrastructure, has now pledged to raise about $1 trillion to upgrade ports, to build roads, to set up electricity power lines, etc. Is this enough for a country that has 1 billion people to meet a deficit that is really, really severe?
And I go one step further. I say, is it adaptive enough? Because, you know, as the country stands at the moment, it's got 45 million entrepreneurs, which work anything from a small shop on the one end to something large on the other side. A real process of creative destruction at work. 40% illiterate, 40% having not finished school. And as that country continues to adapt to a world and to very high GDP type growth, is that infrastructure going to be adaptive enough in order to change with a middle class that starts rising up?
I think Kobie's raised an interesting point, and a final question to you, because it's something we're grappling with in South Africa as well. Once this global slowdown has passed the worst of the impasse, we're hoping to see growth in the region of 6%, and that we're expecting that kind of industrial growth is going to put immense pressure on the electricity grid. How has India survived in creating great industries and industrialists and these, how many entrepreneurs that you mentioned, 45 million entrepreneurs in India, to power ahead when they've got such infrastructure gaps?
Well, in fact, that's her problem. And the other challenge that she has is that she must introduce new technologies, but at the same time make sure that they are green and sustainable. At the moment, she's doing it with really Victorian type of machinery and equipment that also pollutes the environment. And so they really have to start from scratch. It's like a bit like bypassing the landline telephonic system and going straight to cell phones. They have to do that kind of leap.